Hey there. So this is the new moon forecast for the new moon in Aquarius, and this happens on March 11th at 2:45 Pacific time approximately. You see the moon is up here in Aquarius about 27:20 with sun. It's also very close to Venus, 23 degrees. It's not unusual because Sun, Venus, and Mercury are usually very close together. They're rarely more than one sign from each other. Mercury is also there, Mercury retrograde. So we also have Saturn and Rahu here in Libra. Saturn is in an exchange with its ruler Venus, which is very auspicious. So Saturn-Venus themes are very supported right now. Mars is in Pisces, South Node Ketu is in Aries, and Jupiter is in Taurus. And the nakshatra of the new moon is Purva Bhadrapada, which means early auspicious foot or early auspicious result. And it has to do with lightning strike of inspiration that comes down from the heavens and gives us a glimpse of our divinity. And Aja Ekapada is the deity, which literally means one-footed goat. And one foot refers to lightning, which strikes at one point. It's also, interestingly, to me, at least metaphorically, related to a unicorn, which is like a horse with one horn. Reminds me of that. And this isn't unusual because this star exists in the constellation of Pegasus in the sky, which is the winged horse. So there's correlations between winged horse. I mean, again, you can see when you don't, it doesn't take that much imagination to understand the metaphor of one-footed goat, winged horse, and unicorn. It's kind of like a unicorn is a horse with a horn, a mythical figure. And, of course, Pegasus is the constellation, the winged horse. And the deity here is Aja Ekapada, the one-footed goat. That is related to lightning strike of inspiration. So, again, that's the feeling. It's conveyed in different ways, like a winged horse flying or a unicorn, which is a mythical figure. So this inspirational theme is what will be very resonant on this new moon. And again, people sometimes are like, well, new moon, okay, is that like full moon? Or, full moon is like the one everybody talks about. You don't hear the new moon talked about very often, but that's the actual cycle. Because the full moon is pretty and we see it and, oh, full moon, many people mistakenly say, okay, the full moon, that's the beginning of this cycle. The full moon's not the beginning of a cycle. It's the middle of a cycle that starts on the new moon. Understand this. That's why whenever I do a full moon forecast, I talk about the new moon that it's referring to. And that's the point we're having now. That's when the cycle starts. The cycle starts on a new moon. It's like birth. Literally, sun and moon come together. It's like the sperm meeting the egg, and there's birth. Then the moon travels, and then like the middle of the life is the full moon of that cycle, just like people in their, let's say, 40s or, where they have like midlife crisis or midlife whatever. Then the second half of life, waning cycle of the moon, happens the next part, which is like the second part of life where you start to make peace with things and become more introspective and more mature and let go of the attachments until the next cycle comes. It's very much a metaphor for life. You should understand this, really. We're born, then we have this like time where we're in many ways externalized, living externally through the world, we're going. Then we have this midlife point where we're kind of halfway in and we're like, okay, that's like the full moon reflecting back the life we've lived so far. Then from there, hopefully, we'll have this reckoning where we learn to then become more introspective, then, more letting go, more making peace with others and things like that. This is where people really start to do most of their intense work, when they're, after the mid-30s and into the 40s, when we've lived enough to know, okay, you know what? it's not just the way I was raised, and I've made my mistakes too, and it's time to really reflect and feel and calibrate what we've done, and then the rest of our life becomes much more, hopefully, much more introspective and things like that. So that's the full moon, is that point where we're full of that cycle. So you can take that lifetime metaphor and just map it straight over to each month. Each month we're at some point in this cycle. These are cycles within cycles of our life. Sun, moon, and earth, their relationship to each other is why we're here. So each new moon is the beginning of a cycle. And it's really, I'm not going to say it's more important, because everything is just as important as it is, but it's important to understand the difference and to realize that the full moon is not the beginning of a cycle. I mean, it's the halfway point of a sun cycle. And everything is the beginning of some kind of cycle, you might say. But again, it's often conveyed exactly opposite. Like, this is the beginning of a cycle, and they assess where the moon is at that point. Like we just had the full moon in Leo. This is the beginning of the Leo cycle. No, it's not. It's the halfway point in the Aquarius or the Capricorn cycle, or wherever the new moon happened, if you're going to look at it that way. When the sun goes into that place, that's the beginning of the cycle, because the sun is the origin of life, and then the moon is the creative principle that creates a form and something external around it. The sun is Shiva, the moon is Shakti, Devi, Parvati, and the creative principle of that. So that's what we need to understand. So when we have the sun and moon come together, the new moon is when it's like new life, new birth, rebirth. That's why the day before, when we have that, what is actually called Shivaratri, literally, each month it's called Shivaratri. Once a year it's called Mahashivaratri, on the 14th lunar day, which is the day before the end of the cycle, which is the Amavasya. The new moon is the end of the cycle. That's when the cycle stops. It's like that's the in-between life state, literally. The 14th lunar day is like the death day. And then the 15th day is like in-between life state. The new moon is like there's no life. It's like it correlates to that. It correlates to the in-between life state. After the 14th day, which is when you, let's say, if you want to use the body, it's metaphorically the day you die, 14th. 15th day is in-between life state. That's the new moon. I'm sorry, that's what's called the new moon, which is the 15th lunar day. And then the cycle begins again on the first Titi, which is once the sun and moon come together. Because the new moon day is actually before sun and moon come together. So as you see in this chart, moon is 27:19, 27:21. If you watch when I change this, 1 minute, 2 minutes, it's still new moon. The next degree, it's 27:20 for the moon, then 27:21. Probably the next minute, 2 minutes, there it is, Pratipada. As soon as sun and moon both become 27:21, as soon as they actually meet, that's the beginning of the next cycle, at that precise moment. Up to 1 second before, it's still waning. The moon is still waning. It's getting as dark as possible. Then as soon as it meets, it starts waxing again. So this new moon begins, exactly at 14:51, 2:51 p.m. Pacific time. It's important to understand, this is the world you live in. This is the real world you live in. So Purva Bhadrapada and Aquarius is where this happens. So it's that lightning strike of inspiration that comes from the heaven and connects us to that higher celestial nature. And it's related to the planet Jupiter, who is also related to lightning, and even Greek mythology, he's called Thor, and the deities here, Aja Ekapada was one of the, what are called Maruts, or the attendants of Lord Shiva, called Rudras. Maruts were when they were related to Indra, and Rudras are when they're related to Rudra. But they're very similar energies, which are celestial beings that look to deliver the soul, salvation. And Ajakapada is one that comes down from heaven to give the soul the awareness of its true self. So the lightning comes as the soul in the body, hitting our experience, saying, I'm this being. And we don't know it till we experience it. So it's that lightning strike of inspiration. And so in Aquarius, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and it connects us to culture, connects us to long-term things that outlive just our lifetime in this body and in this form. So it already has this, it already conveys this higher dharmic principle behind it, and brings a sense of, things beyond just this lifetime. And then, so that's the part of, so Purvabhadra is the part of Aquarius that connects to that, in a more transpersonal way. Because Aquarius has a lot to do with culture and other people of this world. Purvabhadra is where Aquarius becomes Pisces, where once we feel that connection to this world, we look for the other world. Because the last pada of Purvabhadra is in Pisces. So it's literally where Aquarius becomes Pisces, where the universalized individual in this world tries to become the transpersonal metaphysical soul of eternity. It's the bridge between those things, and it starts with that lightning strike. In this world, of this body, of this form, of this being, we don't know about our nature as a creature from beyond until we experience it. We have a lot of concepts. We hear spiritual teachers talk about the spirit and this and that, and we only measure that relative to what we've experienced, literally, the state of consciousness we've experienced. And Purvabhadra is the experience of ourself as source. I want you to get that. It's not just some, it's not just some emotionally peaceful place where, okay, I meditate, I've done yoga, now I feel good and peaceful and I'm calm, and just some emotionally calm place. That's just a sattvic emotional state. That becomes spiritual, and it's necessary to get in that state. Otherwise, you can't experience the lightning strike of the soul, the Paramatman. Because if you're agitated, then that's never going to happen. So first, like yoga cultivates sattva. It cultivates that calm and peaceful state in the mind. Because without that calm, peaceful state, you can't receive the lightning strike of inspiration. But people often confuse the two. They're like, yeah, I know what you mean. I feel spiritual. I'm so calm. That's calm. That's a sattvic mind. That's finally being calm and peaceful, which is really our true nature. And once we can sit in that true nature through form, through the mind, and the mind can rest in its state of peace, rather than the agitation of the external world, only then can we receive the lightning strike of inspiration, because it comes to us. We can't will it. We cannot will that. It's a gift from God. It is a gift from God. That's why, again, if you're trying to do meditation to get a result, even if it's to get that result, and in fact, this is why people meditate, because they want to get something. They want to get that result. But if that's your intention, it ain't going to come. You need to be immersed in the moment. That's why you need to fall in love with one of these deities and feel the beauty and joy and love of that. If you can fall into that love, then the strike comes. Then the lightning strike comes. The inspiration comes. But it doesn't come because you're saying, okay, I'm meditating. Bring the inspiration. Bring the strike. Bring the awareness. No. So again, it's like you need the sattvic mind in order to receive the lightning strike of inspiration. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. And until you have that, you don't know what you may be calling spiritual might not be spiritual at all. It's just peaceful and calm, which is great. I mean, let's face it. We'd all trade that for something else. But once that becomes deeply embedded, and you can drop into that easily and habitually, and your mind becomes that, and your mind becomes sattvic, then you don't even get the strikes of inspiration anymore. The strikes of inspiration come at first. Then what happens is once you drop into that sattvic state of mind, the sattvic state of mind is actually connected to that state beyond. What's called samadhi, where it's that unbroken flow, where you're connected to the source all the time. But before you have samadhi, you have satori. And satori is the glimpse. So this new moon is related to that glimpse, related to that Satori. After Satori, the glimpse, you have Samadhi, the flow, the unbroken flow. But before that, if you haven't had that glimpse and you haven't had that Samadhi, it's very possible that the practices that you're doing are just cultivating a very sattvic mind, which is great. Keep it up. But again, I'm also saying this because there's a lot of confusion around this. Believe me, I deal with it a lot in my astrology practice. And, you know, there's a lot of confusion between what's spiritual and what's just a joyful, peaceful, emotional state. So this is related to that joyful, peaceful, emotional state being that fertile ground for the lightning strike of inspiration. The consciousness becomes so peaceful and calm that the mind becomes like charged with fertile static electricity. And again, energy can't remain static. If you calm the mind, then what happens is it becomes still, and that void needs to be filled with something. So it becomes filled with the light of truth. But typically we're so filled with something else constant. We're constantly filled with thoughts, desires, ideas. First we have to learn how to empty all that, which is cultivating sattva. We empty all of that going on. And that creates space for something bigger to come in. Right? And that's Purvabhadra. Cool stuff. This is the real joy of Vedic astrology and yoga and Eastern practices and how they're related. This section of the zodiac is like rich with that because this is where the soul's becoming liberated. The zodiac is a metaphor for life, starting with Aries and going through. Anyone who has studied with me for a long time, any of my certification students or whatever, they've heard these stories of this metaphor of creation, especially told through the nakshatras and whatnot. And I have a course on this that teaches it as well. This is how the ancient Vedic people shared this wisdom with us. And it's not just some abstraction. It's connected to the cosmos. We are the cosmos. And this is that part of us that is ready to be liberated. But we need that strike of inspiration to come down. So it's very much supported by the connection between Saturn and Venus and their sambandha, their joining of energy, because Venus is ruling Saturn's sign and Saturn is ruling Venus's sign. So that brings that concentration, effort, stillness, peace, contentment, which is Venus, together. And Venus is also about that joy of service, that love of culture, that love of others in a transpersonal way, because that's what Aquarius is about. It's not just about my desires, which is what Venus is about. I want to be happy. In Aquarius, Venus says, I'm not happy unless the culture is happy. Venus in Aquarius says, if one person suffers, we're all suffering. It says, if animals are tortured and mistreated, then we're all tortured and mistreated. Maybe it doesn't look that way in the short term, but in the long term, we know this is true because we're all connected. Who wouldn't feel a wrenching pain to watch an animal suffer? This is why we take our slaughterhouses and put them somewhere where nobody has to watch it. The slaughterhouse was in the grocery store, and we had to watch that animal getting killed and butchered. You'd probably have a lot less meat eaters. I'm not going to go off on a rant, but it's just an example. So we have this, Venus in Aquarius brings that desire for personal pleasure and beauty into the realm of culture and time that sustains and outlives just our personal lifetime. History and culture and great teachings that sustain throughout the millennia. Great stuff. Of course, we also have Mars and Pisces, where we have the spiritual warrior defending the higher, the highest principles, and Jupiter and Taurus, where we're putting our principles into practice in practical, embodied ways. So look for this to be a 30 days where we're actually moving from the Aquarius lesson into the Pisces lesson, because the new moon happens at the very end of Aquarius. Then, like 3 days later, it goes into Pisces, and then the full moon's going to happen in Virgo. So we're having the sun signs start before the moon signs, or actually, I'm sorry, the moon signs started, we had the full moon in Leo, so the moon signs are starting before the sun signs, but it's still, this is how it works. It is the origin of the Aquarius lesson, and then it moves into Pisces. So it's Aquarius becoming Pisces. The individual connected with the collective, looking to then merge with that which is even beyond the collective, which is the cosmic. Because we tend to think, I'm doing great work, I'm making the world a better place and all, and that's our highest aspirations as a being in the world through this lifetime, is the Aquarius ideal. As a being in the world, is what I'm saying. We all have this idea that we could make this big difference, and culture will be affected, and our values will change the world. We all have this vision that the things we love the most will impact everyone, and our life on Earth will have made a difference. That's big Aquarius themes. My desires and the things I think are beautiful impact everyone and change the world for the best and the highest. And our soul comes here to do that. And until we know we've done that, we keep incarnating. Aquarius is the place where our soul is where we're trying to make the highest contribution possible. But then from there, we get into the metaphysical, which souls who have realized my connection with the world isn't dependent on some external result, or however it looks to that being's soul or that individual jiva, then place a lot of emphasis on the Pisces, which is I'm in the world but not of the world. So it's the individual soul becoming universalized and then becoming cosmic and celestial for the next 30 days. Pretty cool stuff. So those who are members of my site now get to hear the forecast for all 12 signs, including theirs. And if you're not a member, you should check it out. 2 weeks, only 1 penny, and you'll get to hear how this cycle is going to affect you and your sign, and then get the other forecasts and classes. You can have a 2-week trial and see how it works for you. It's very easy. You'll get these great forecasts, including a monthly forecast. You'll get the full March forecast already. So check it out.